India Front meeting. As the first meeting of the coordination committee takes place at Mr. Sharad Pawar's residence, a couple of important challenges as well as messages. Now, Mr. Pawar, of course, because he's a veteran politician and someone who perhaps there's a hope can reconcile the differences within the India Front. So, therefore, the lead has been given to him. Now, what has been decided, as we have been reporting earlier also, that at least on 440 seats, there would be only one joint India Front candidate to be put up against the BJP or NDA so as to ensure that there is no division of the anti-BJP votes. But this again is easier said than done. Over the last few days, we have been seeing lots of conflicts. For example, Bhagwat Mann, the Punjab Chief Minister, made it very clear that at least in Punjab, he's not going to give even a single ticket to the Congress. Congress has been in power in the state. They also have a large number of MPs from there. Would they really accept the situation? No, because the winnability criteria according to the Congress applies in Punjab because they think and they know that they can win from the state. How do you reconcile that? Let's move to West Bengal. As far as West Bengal gets, what TMC sources are telling us is that apart from Murshidabad and possibly Malda, the Congress cannot win seats in the state. We've been hearing what Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary has been speaking out against Mamata Banerjee, most recently being on the presidential banquet for G20 delegates, where he asked that why was Mamata Banerjee present there? Was she trying to win over or placate the BJP? It is very, very clear that there is no love lost between the two sides, but Adhir requires to attack Mamata because that's what his politics is all about. That's one problem. But can the TMC and will the TMC agree to give more than 2 seats to the Congress party? I don't think so. Same problem in Delhi, where the Congress has 0 in both the assembly as in Lok Sabha. The AAP also doesn't have any Lok Sabha seats, but they think by virtue of the fact that they are in power in Delhi, they can at least win more than a Congress can. So these are those tricky areas which really need to be sorted about. And I think the last time round, as we reported at the Mumbai meeting, the grudge of, say, Mamata Banerjee, Arvind Kejriwal, even RJD and JDU was that why hasn't the resolution put down the kind of a deadline on when these seat sharing talks should take place? Because time is clearly running out. We also know that this coordination meeting is taking place in the backdrop of Abhishek Banerjee being given an ED summon, Chandrababu Naidu's arrest. What they're going to also raise the point is this is deliberate witch hunt. We all need to come together in the days to come. There's a possibility that similar kind of action may be taken against many of the other India Front leaders as well, but we are not supposed to be daunted by that. These are going to be the inherent problems within coordination. How is it going to be? Will it be a joint campaign where they'll come together and campaign as far as the local or state elections are concerned, which are coming up? I think the first baby step is really going to be taken as far as the first coordination committee meeting goes. But the first big step is going to be taken towards seat sharing and the India Front meeting. As the first meeting of the coordination committee takes place at Mr. Sharad Pawar's residence, a couple of important challenges as well as messages. Now, Mr. Pawar, of course, because he's a veteran politician and someone who perhaps there's a...
Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. We're back in our Delhi studios. Russia's president has become the latest leader to jump onto the self-reliance bandwagon. He has hailed Prime Minister Modi's Make in India mission. Putin is making a case for Russia to follow in India's footsteps. But how will Moscow make it work? Sanctions are holding back their economy, plus the Kremlin still needs money to fight the war in Ukraine. New Delhi might hold the key to unlocking Make in Russia. We'll explain how. Putin is also hosting North Korea's Kim Jong-un. Reports say they're ready to strike a deal. Moscow is ready to buy North Korean ammo, but at what price? Apparently, Pyongyang wants support for its nuclear program. Meanwhile, new iPhones are out. We'll tell you if it's a case of old wine in a new bottle. Egypt's move to ban the face veil has sparked a debate, and scientists at NASA have found a new planet. It could have water on its surface. We'll get to the full story. The headlines first. Oil cuts by Saudi Arabia and Russia will cause a big supply shortfall. That's the warning from the International Energy Agency. This also raises the risk of further market volatility. The warning comes a day after oil prices jumped. The gap between global supply and demand is said to be the widest since 2007. China appoints a full-time ambassador to Afghanistan. It's the first country to do so since the Taliban took over in 2021. It comes amid China's plans for expansion of the Belt and Road Initiative. Beijing wants to extend the project to Afghanistan. China says it's quote-unquote upgrading its ties with Venezuela. President Xi Jinping meets his counterpart Nicolas Maduro. It's the Venezuelan president's first state visit to Beijing since 2018. Maduro wants Venezuela to join BRICS. Beijing is Caracas's main creditor. The UK's Parliament has adopted a controversial Northern Ireland bill. It grants immunity to fighters involved in the sectarian violence in Northern Ireland. The conflict began in the 1960s and lasted around 3 decades. More than 3,500 people were killed. Many deaths still remain under investigation. And in India, Kerala battles the Nipah virus. At least 2 deaths have been reported from the brain-damaging virus. 7 villages declared as containment zones. Schools and offices shut in the affected areas. This is the 4th Nipah virus outbreak in Kerala since 2018. India's G20 success is opening new doors. The Delhi Declaration was a victory for Indian diplomacy. The tides of global leadership are changing. India is steering its course with confidence and world leaders are taking note. Leaders like Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, is taking inspiration from India, it seems. He's praised India's pursuit of self-reliance. He's hailed the Make in India initiative. Listen to this.
We should learn from many partners of ours, namely our partners in India. They are mostly focusing on production and the use of the cars and vessels produced in India. And in this regard, Prime Minister Modi is doing the right thing by encouraging people to use the brand made in India.
Prime Minister Modi is doing the right thing, he says. Putin is clearly impressed by Make in India. And this is not the first time he's praised this idea. He talked about the same in the month of June as well. Putin said Make in India has had an impressive effect and the idea is worth emulating. Make in India is in fact generating a lot of buzz. Yesterday, Apple launched new iPhones. For the first time, the company is selling made in India iPhones on launch. We'll discuss that in detail in just a bit. But the larger initiative of achieving self-reliance through Make in India has completed 8 years now. And in these 8 years, foreign direct investment in India has almost doubled, from around $45 billion in 2014-15 to $83 billion in 2022. What do you think has enabled this turnaround? One of the biggest reasons is incentives. Many production-linked schemes have been rolled out. Manufacturers are getting concessions when they churn out products from India, and these incentives are in the form of tax breaks. They're available in 14 sectors, from mobile manufacturing to pharmaceuticals, automobiles, telecom, textile, even batteries. These incentives have helped boost FDI in India and unlock the potential of Make in India. The Russian president wants to do the same. He's making a push for Make in Russia. Putin is yet to spell out how he will execute this. But he joins a growing list of leaders aiming for self-reliance, from Chinese President Xi Jinping to US President Joe Biden and, of course, Prime Minister Modi of India. Every leader is pushing for self-sufficiency. In Russia's case, the need is more urgent. Russia faces serious growth constraints. There are tough Western sanctions. Leading Russian banks are being treated like outcasts. They are being cut off, or they have been cut off from the global financial system. And the Russian ruble is struggling. Last month, its value plummeted drastically. $1 was worth more than 100 rubles. In fact, 2023 has been a bad year for the Russian currency. It has been one of the worst performers this year. So Moscow has made some interventions. Russia's central bank has raised interest rates. It's a desperate attempt to prop up the ruble. It resulted in some recovery, but the fight is still on. This afternoon, $1 was still worth about 100 rubles. Then there is the challenge of inflation. Even Putin is unable to ignore this. Inflation in Russia is more than 5%, which does not sound very bad, but apparently President Putin finds it worrying, and here's what he said.
Of course, we need to influence this. But if we miss a situation that will lead to uncontrollable inflation growth, in the long run it will be even worse for the economy. Because in conditions of high inflation, it's practically impossible to form business plans.
According to the Russian central bank, 4% inflation is ideal. Anything above that is a problem. And Putin is talking about the same. High inflation usually leads to high interest rates, and no business would like that. That's because loans become more expensive with higher interest rates. Business owners do not have incentives to expand, and this hurts growth. And this is a trajectory that President Putin wants to avoid. But in this current scenario, self-reliance would be hard to achieve. And I'll explain why. Why would anyone invest in Make in Russia if interest rates are high, if the economy is constrained by sanctions, and if there is pressure to keep a war going? So Moscow is turning to New Delhi. Russia wants to attract Indian investors. The possibility was floated earlier this year. A Russian official spoke about this. He said Russian government agencies are working on a plan. Over 1,000 companies have left Russia since this war began, so there is a gap. And someone needs to step up to fill this gap. Russia is keen to offer that space to India. It has identified sectors where Indian companies could invest. Sectors like information technology, fast-moving consumer goods or FMCG, fertilizers, transport. This could be an attractive proposition, although implementation is not going to be easy. Western sanctions will be the biggest roadblock. They might block Indian investments in Russia. Payments and the flow of money will have to be figured out. And both sides are grappling with this issue. Recently, Russia and India started trading in their native currencies. There is money in the bank. But Russia is facing some problems. They have billions of Indian rupees. They don't know how to use it. Last week, the Russian foreign minister spoke about this. Sergei Lavrov said, India is working on a solution. It could allow Moscow to invest this money. The where and the how are yet to be figured out. But this, remember, is a very crucial piece of the puzzle. Without solving it, without figuring out the payment mechanism, any new proposal will be a non-starter. Putin was also playing host today. He welcomed North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to Russia. It's a special visit because Kim rarely travels outside his country. In fact, he's visited just 4 countries, and one of them is Russia. Kim first visited Russia in 2019. He traveled to Vladivostok and met Vladimir Putin. This time, they're meeting elsewhere at Vostochny, the Vostochny Cosmodrome in Russia's far east. The location does have significance, but we'll get to that later. Kim departed North Korea around afternoon on Sunday. He traveled on a private armored train. It reached the Russian Cosmodrome earlier today. Once there, the tour began. Putin personally showed Kim the entire facility, the launching pad, the assembling site, the design centers, all of it. The North Korean leader seemed very invested. He also asked questions to the Russian officials present there. After the tour, both leaders held talks. Putin thanked Kim for accepting his invite to visit Russia.
Of course, we need to discuss the issues of economic cooperation and humanitarian issues, as well as the situation in the region. We have a lot of issues to discuss. I am very glad to see you. Thank you for accepting our invitation and coming to Russia.
Kim Jong-un had a lot more to say. He said Russia is fighting a quote-unquote sacred war with the West. And for that, Kim offered his unconditional support. Listen to this now.
Russia is now in the sacred fight against hegemonic forces in order to protect its sovereignty and security interests. We have constantly expressed our full and unconditional support for all the decisions taken by the President and the Russian leadership. And I want to assure you that we will always be together with Russia in the fight against imperialism.
Could that also mean weapons? The United States believes it does. They say Kim Jong-un will sell weapons to Russia, weapons that could be used in Ukraine. Both Moscow and Pyongyang have denied this claim, but then again, that's been the trend. The West says Iran is arming Russia. Tehran denies this. The West also says Chinese companies are backing Russia. Again, Beijing denies this. But beyond the defense deals, what does this visit mean? For Putin, it's not a good look. A decade ago, he was attending G8 talks in the West. Now he's courting the most isolated leader in the world. From any angle, it's a downgrade. But for Kim Jong-un, it's a big deal. He is facing Western pressure to give up his nukes. The sanctions have crippled his economy, so Kim Jong-un needs allies, and who better than Russia? One of the biggest exporters of food and fertilizers. Pyongyang could easily swap some weapons for food. But Kim's wish list is longer. He'll be hoping for some help in the rocket and satellite departments. Which brings us to the meeting venue. Why a cosmodrome? Vostochny symbolizes Russia's space ambitions. You see, during the Cold War, most of the launches were done from Baikonur. But that's in Kazakhstan, which is now a different country. In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed and Kazakhstan became an independent country. So Russia needed a new launch site. It was Putin who ordered the construction of Vostochny. The first launch was in 2016. The last was this year, Russia's ill-fated mission to the moon. So this cosmodrome is the nerve center of Russia's space program, where they build and launch rockets. Kim Jong-un could use that technology. He tried to launch a spy satellite earlier this year. 2 attempts, 2 failures. So the fear is Putin could transfer this technology to North Korea, and this would violate sanctions. But then again, let's face it, I think we are beyond the point of respecting sanctions. Putin was asked about this possibility, about collaborating on rockets and satellites, and this was his response. Let me quote, "That's exactly why we came here. The leader of North Korea shows great interest in space, in rocketry, and they're trying to develop their space program. We'll show our new projects." So Putin is open to cooperation, but what's in it for him? Why is he risking a meeting with a global pariah? I know Washington is talking about weapons, but weapons alone cannot explain such a meeting. There is some strategic thought. 2 of North Korea's rivals are Japan and South Korea. Both of them are Western allies. Both have also sanctioned Russia. So Putin needs a regional counterweight, an ally who can keep South Korea and Japan occupied. Someone mercurial, powerful, and desperate. And who better than Kim Jong-un? He unveiled a tactical nuclear submarine recently. He also fired 2 ballistic missiles today. His country did. It's very rare for North Korea. They do not make big moves when Kim is out of the country. Maybe it was a message to the West. Whether Kim is home or not, the military stands ready. But coming back to Vladimir Putin, his outreach is all about convenience, because his meeting with Kim may not look good today, but it does pay well. Just like his meeting with Syria's Bashar al-Assad or Venezuela's president Nicolas Maduro. As long as it suits him strategically, Putin will play any card, even the rogue dictator one. Both Russia and North Korea stand to gain from this partnership, but the wider region does not. It's a sign that camp politics is getting worse. And now let's talk about the India-China standoff. No, I'm not talking about the one at the border. This was a standoff during the G20 summit. It happened at a 5-star hotel, the hotel where the Chinese delegation was staying. They were at the Taj Hotel in New Delhi. It played host to many elite delegates, like Brazil's President Lula da Silva. And Brazil, you know, is the next host of the G20. So important delegations stayed in this hotel. The Chinese delegation was at the same hotel. And they threw a lot of tantrums, so much so that their actions led to a tense face-off. Members of the Chinese delegation arrived on Thursday, and this was an advance team. The Chinese premier reached New Delhi a day later, that is on Friday. Now, Friday, of course, was the day before the summit was about to begin. So before the premier came, some of his team was already here. They were put through a security check, which is routine procedure. Everyone goes through this for their own safety. In this case, the hotel security team noticed some bags. Reports say they looked unusual. Their dimensions seemed off. But they were labeled as diplomatic baggage. Now, Indian security officials were also present. They too saw the bags and they let them go. This was as per protocol. A diplomatic bag, also known as a diplomatic pouch, is like a container. It is used by countries to send documents or messages, sometimes even some articles or things, and this diplomatic bag or pouch is protected under the Vienna Convention, no matter the urgency. No other country can open this bag. No other country is allowed to take a look inside. And Indian officials followed this rule. These unusual looking Chinese bags were labeled diplomatic, so they were allowed inside. The Chinese officials took the bags to their rooms, and soon after that, the Indian side got a complaint. A hotel staffer saw one of these bags. This person had gone inside the room and came out worried. So a report was filed. This staff member filed a complaint. They said there was quote-unquote suspicious equipment inside the bags. And that's when the Indian officials swung into action. The security team approached the Chinese delegation. They knocked on the doors of their hotel room. This time they asked for a closer look. They wanted to put the bags inside a scanner, a bit like the baggage scan that you see at airports. So the Indian officers wanted to scan the Chinese bags, and this is not against the rules. India follows the Vienna Convention, and the rule book is very clear about such situations. Let me show you something. The protocol handbook of the Ministry of External Affairs. What does it say about diplomatic bags? Such bags must have clear markings to begin with, and they should only have diplomatic documents or articles intended for official use. These bags cannot be opened under any circumstances. The rule book says that very clearly. They cannot be opened. But what about putting them through a scanner? That is perfectly okay. In fact, let me quote. Diplomatic bags to be transported as cargo or registered baggage shall be X-ray screened as per the security instructions in force. Such suspicious baggage shall not be transported until and unless the doubts are cleared to the satisfaction of the security staff. So that's all that the security officials wanted to do. Put the suspicious bag through a screening. China did not allow it. They put their foot down. They refused to allow any checks. And this led to a standoff. The Chinese delegation refused to cooperate and Indian officials refused to budge. They said they want to check the bags, not open them, just scan them. And this drama went on for 12 hours. Ultimately, the Chinese side came up with a way to evade scrutiny. They dispatched these bags to the Chinese embassy. And here we must praise the Indian team. Despite the pressure from the Chinese side, they held their ground. They pushed China to be transparent. A 3-member team stood outside the delegation's room. They remained outside for 12 hours. They left only when China decided to send the bags to the embassy. So what was China trying to hide in these bags? Why did they block the security check? Well, that remains a mystery. The suspicion is that the Chinese side had brought a jamming device or equipment used to communicate privately. In fact, the Chinese delegation was quite paranoid about this, about securing their communications. They even demanded a separate and private internet connection. This request was declined. What does this incident tell you? It is a glimpse into the psyche of the world's second largest economy and the people who rule it. That's China for you. Secretive, confrontational, and ready to kick up a fuss. December brings Christmas, September brings iPhones. All of us have gotten used to this cycle. On Tuesday, Apple unveiled their latest iPhone. It's called the iPhone 15. And what's the big headline? Well, there isn't one. There hasn't been a headline for a good 5 years, in fact. Yet, Apple is not slowing down. It is the most valuable company in the whole world, meaning they are doing something right. Let's try to understand what. We are looking at 5 questions tonight. Number 1, what's different about the iPhone 15? Nothing major, just small things. All models get a USB type charger. You also get brighter screens, better cameras. The high-end models come with a titanium frame, so more strength. One slightly notable difference is the action button. For this, you need to buy the Pro or the Pro Max models. But what does the button do? You may have seen this slider on the side of most iPhones. They put the device in silent mode. In the new models, that is gone. Instead of the slider, there is an action button. You can customize it the way you want, maybe to open the camera or to turn on the flashlight or start recording a voice note. Other than that, it's mostly the same, which raises the second question. How expensive is it? In the United States, the iPhone 15 has a base price of $799. The 14 was priced the same last year, so largely no price difference. But here in India, Apple has to answer some questions. Let me show you a comparison. We're looking at the price of Apple's top-end model, the iPhone 15 Pro Max. In India, it starts at 1,60,000 rupees. And abroad, much less, 99,000 rupees in the United States, 124,000 rupees, 1,24,000 rupees in Britain, 1,15,000 rupees in Dubai, and 1,20,000 rupees in Vietnam. So between India and Vietnam, there's a price difference of 40,000 rupees. That's around 500 US dollars. With that money, you can go to Vietnam, buy the iPhone and return. If you don't like Vietnam, then try Dubai. My point is, the prices do not make sense, especially when you realize some iPhones are now made in India. That's right. Apple supplier Foxconn has a plant in Tamil Nadu and they make the new iPhone 15. They will hit the market along with the ones made in China. So common sense says they should be cheaper, no import taxes, lesser transport costs. So technically made in India iPhones should be cheaper. Why aren't they? Well, only Apple can answer that question. Their CEO Tim Cook said he wants India's middle class to buy iPhones, but at these prices, well, good luck. Now to question number 3. How does Apple keep doing this? I mean, growth without innovation. How do they do it? After the iPhone 11, most models have been the same. You could argue that they're faster, they have better cameras, but those are not game-changing features really. Yet Apple shares keep rising. When iPhone 11 came out, Apple was trading at around $50. That's $50 per share. And now it is $173 per share. What explains this growth? Apple's marketing. Most people don't think of the iPhone as just a phone. It's a status symbol. It's a luxury. At the same time, it's a lifestyle choice, what many call the Apple ecosystem. Some marketing experts have compared Apple to a religion or a cult. And the numbers prove this. Apple has a customer retention rate of 90%. 9 out of 10 customers stay with Apple. They swap their iPhone for another iPhone. I don't think even cults have 90% approval rating. And the Apple leadership knows this. Listen to CEO Tim Cook at yesterday's Apple event.
An iPhone impacts just about everything we do. They're with us all the time. And if you left either one at home, I bet you'd go back and get it.
Which brings us to question number 4. What next for Apple? Where are the challenges? Well, geopolitics is a big one. Apple is stuck between the United States and China now. Recent reports said government employees in China had been banned from using iPhones. At first, Beijing did not say anything, but today they broke their silence. China says there is no ban on purchase or use of iPhones, but they did flag some security issues.
China has not issued laws, regulations or policy documents that prohibit the purchase and use of foreign brand phones such as Apple's. But recently we did notice a lot of media exposure of security incidents related to Apple's phones.
So no ban yet, but there could be one in the future. Politics aside, Apple's biggest challenge will be innovation. Consider AI, artificial intelligence. It is said to be the next big thing in technology. If Apple can harness that, it could be game-changing. And there is already talk of this. Reports say Apple is spending millions of dollars every day on AI, millions every day. Some of it is low-key, like using AI to improve existing features. For example, Siri. Apple says Siri is 25% more accurate because of AI. If they can build on this, great. If not, customers will get tired of this routine. New models, same features, and a huge price tag. This customer fatigue is already happening, in fact. It's our 5th and final question. What's happening to the smartphone market? Well, it's shrinking. Sales in 2023 are expected to be down by 6%. That's around 1.15 billion devices. I know it sounds like a lot, but it's actually the lowest in a decade. In the first quarter of 2023, around 294 million phones were sold. In the second quarter, 268 million phones. Sales are being dragged down by China. Despite that, Apple is the least affected. They sold 46 million phones in the first quarter. They sold 45 million in the second quarter. Apple today makes up 20% of the global market. Before the pandemic, it was 13%. So the company is doing something right. People know there is little or no innovation. People know they're paying too much. People also know that other phones are available, yet Apple's domination continues. I guess it is a cult. Our next story comes from Japan. This country is known for many things: rich culture, technological innovation, even sushi. But if there's one thing it's not known for, it's gender equality. Japan is now trying to turn that around, and we'll tell you how. They're starting with political representation. Today, the Prime Minister of Japan, Fumio Kishida, announced a cabinet rejig. There were a lot of changes, but the most important one was this. The new cabinet features 5 women. This is the first time 5 women will be part of the cabinet since 2014. In all, there are 19 ministers in the cabinet, so technically, women now represent more than a quarter of the Japanese cabinet. It's on par with Italy's female ratio. But Japan still lags far behind other G7 members. The government had initially committed to 30% women representation by 2020. Soon they gave up on that goal. And now they want to meet the target by 2030. They plan to offer babysitters and create a fund to support female candidates. So this rejig by Prime Minister Kishida is a step towards it. Now, Japan's history is steeped in tradition. Men are looked at as breadwinners. Women are seen as caregivers. Like in most traditional societies, these roles are deeply ingrained in the Japanese society. Children are taught these norms from an early age. So women often find themselves on the fringe of political power. And it shows in global reports. Like a report on gender parity by the World Economic Forum, it ranks Japan 125th out of 146 countries. That's really low for a developed nation. On gender parity in politics, Japan ranks 138th. Even behind China, Saudi Arabia and Turkey. And that's saying something. So this cabinet representation is a good step. It is Japan acknowledging that it needs more inclusive leadership. Of course, it's a move that deserves applause. But beyond that, what does it really change? Around 10% of Japan's lawmakers are female, so not many women join politics in the first place, and this creates a disparity to begin with. You need a wider pool of women lawmakers to select from. And for that, you will need more women to join politics. So that should be a priority. Basically, it should be a bottom-up approach and not necessarily a top-down one. Secondly, it's all about changing mindsets. Many nations have adopted a quota system to ensure that women are adequately represented. But to the Japanese, this quota system is often unfair.
Many people in Japan think of a quota system as unfair and biased and giving extraordinary privilege to women. No, but it's the other way around. The existing system gives too much privilege to men, and particularly men from political dynasties.
Thirdly, it is essential to ensure that these are not just symbolic gestures. Prime Minister Kishida may have appointed more women ministers. But what's the larger policy? Is this a temporary move ahead of snap elections? And while giving them a seat on the table is important, it is also important to ensure that voices are heard. It is important to make sure that they can contribute to real change. Let me give you the example of Rwanda. This is one of the poorest nations in the world we're talking about, nowhere near Japan in GDP, but 61% of lawmakers in the Rwandan parliament are women, 61%. And this reflects in their policies too. The policies support equal rights for men and women. Women are given equal opportunity. Rwanda's gender pay gap is 86 cents to a dollar, one of the lowest in the world. So representation matters only when it is backed by policy. It matters when it is not just a token gesture. Japan's decision to appoint more women in the cabinet is commendable. It's a step towards gender equality. It sends a message that progress is possible in the face of deep-rooted tradition. But this is the first step of a marathon. It is not the finish line. The real work has just begun. Japan has taken a step forward. It needs to stride ahead to dismantle stereotypes and provide equal opportunity. And now let's turn our attention to North Africa, where the scale of destruction is staggering. In Libya, catastrophic floods have killed at least 6,000 people. More than 10,000 are missing. In Morocco, a powerful earthquake has left about 3,000 people dead. Even more are injured. In both nations, devastated communities have waited days for help, but response from Libyan and Moroccan governments seems too little, too late. Aid and rescue efforts have been sluggish. And if you're wondering why that is, the answer is politics.
Two African countries, two entirely different disasters. But grief or anger is all the same. We're talking about Libya and Morocco, where the devastation has been staggering. On Friday last week, a rare earthquake of 6.8 magnitude struck Morocco. It's left over 2,900 people dead and thousands more injured. Meanwhile, in Libya last week, a powerful storm unleashed floodwaters and burst dams. Reports say at least 6,000 are dead, with over 5,000 in the eastern city of Derna alone. At least 10,000 are missing. For both countries, these are the biggest disasters in their modern history. Entire villages have been erased. Roads are littered with dead bodies. People are still trapped under rubble. People are digging survivors out of the debris and burying their dead, often with their bare hands. Some have waited days for help. Part of this delay can be blamed on destroyed infrastructure. In Morocco, remote mountainous regions were the worst hit. These are accessible only by narrow and winding roads, so rescue teams took hours, even days to reach. And in Libya, the floods were so bad in certain regions, rescue groups had difficulty reaching people. In the worst hit Derna, communication lines were down for days. This further hampered efforts, but infrastructure damage can't take all the blame, when the biggest roadblocks were the governments themselves. Let's start with Morocco, where the government's efforts were perplexing. Right after the quake, international aid began pouring in. But the country accepted help from only four: Qatar, the UAE, Spain and the UK. The nations it deems friendly. And who are the unfriendly ones according to Morocco? Algeria, France, Germany, Italy, the US and so many others. Many of whom had assembled their teams and were on standby. But they never got the green light. Typically, organizations like the WHO and the UN are on the scene in disaster zones, but not here. Also, it isn't just about who Morocco accepted assistance from, but also when. The green light came 2 days after the disaster. Compare this with Turkey, which was hit by a deadly earthquake this year. Within hours, authorities appealed for international help. 90 countries enabled their rescue crews and saved hundreds of lives. Now the 72-hour golden period of saving lives has passed in Morocco. Thousands are dead, and people aren't just grieving, they are furious at being abandoned by the government. But at least it's a stable one. That's not the case for Libya. It's been torn apart by over a decade of conflict. Now the country has two rival governments, one in the capital Tripoli, another controlling the country's east. You may remember, floods are ripping through eastern Libya. Did the two governments come together to save their people? The answer is no. Tripoli's government says it dispatched rescue teams, but the eastern government denies this claim. There's another complication. Derna does not share good relations with either governments, so they have been apathetic towards the city. Thus, its long history of infrastructural neglect, which is why 2 aging dams broke due to floods. And while Morocco's quake took the country by surprise, the Libyan floods could have been predicted. They were caused by a storm that gradually approached the nation. Yet authorities didn't study the water levels or prepare an evacuation plan. And now their people are paying a heavy price for it.
Libya's neighbor has reignited an old debate. I'm talking about Egypt. Their government has decided to ban the face veil in schools. Now, the face veil is called the niqab. It's different from the hijab. The hijab is a hair covering. The niqab covers the entire face. Egypt says the hijab is optional, meaning students can cover their hair or not, as they wish. It is their choice as long as the guardian permits it. But the niqab is a strict no. Students cannot wear the face veil to school. The order came from Egypt's education ministry. It will be imposed in the upcoming academic year. As expected, it has triggered a debate. One side says, why should anyone tell women or girls what to wear, let alone the state? The other side says, good riddance. Things like a face veil have no place in a modern society. So which side is right? Before we tackle that question, some facts first. Most women in Egypt do wear the hijab. They cover their hair in public, but the niqab is less common. Only a tiny minority prefer to cover their face as well. But let's be clear, both these customs are rooted in patriarchy. It's about telling women what to wear. With that said, back to our controversial question, which side is right? Honestly, bans have never solved a problem, any problem. In fact, they make things worse. You tell someone they can't do something, their first reaction is this: why not? A better option is to empower people, give them knowledge and information, let them make the right choice. For example, do you know how the idea of the hijab originated? The Quran does not talk about it. It simply asks women and men to dress modestly. Yet who does it apply to? Just women. Scholars have hijacked this concept of veils. For them, maximum veil equals maximum faith and piety. As I said, that's not the case. We need to teach our children that. Maybe then they will abandon the veil themselves. But who will do that? Just look at countries like Iran. If you do not wear a hijab in Iran, you can be punished or worse. That's what happened to 22-year-old Masha Amini. She was tortured and killed by Iran's morality police. Her death anniversary is on Saturday. But 1 year later, what has changed? Iran's morality police are back on the streets. Women still have to wear the hijab in this country. So did education help her? Did education help Masha Amini? She was studying to become a lawyer. Maybe that made her question Iran's hijab law. But in the end, she paid the price for her opinion. My point is, education alone will not be enough. If you live in countries like Iran, you could be punished for your dissent, for your choice. So we need to strike a balance. Muslim leaders in the West call the hijab a choice, a symbol of their identity. But is it not a tone-deaf symbol? Women in Iran put their life on the line to protest the hijab, but elsewhere it's being reclaimed. It's being worn like a badge of honor. What message does this send to girls like Masha Amini? And I know that context matters. The context in Iran and the West is very different. But so do facts. Facts matter too. And the fact is that the hijab is rooted in patriarchy. There should be agreement on that. In the West, in India, in Iran, in Egypt, once you agree on that, you can figure out the next step. Do you ban it or do you phase it out? And that's where governments are so important. In Egypt, the government says the ban is about tackling extremism. In France, the argument is totally different. In 2004, they banned the headscarves. They banned headscarves in school in France. In 2010, they banned face veils in public. And this year, they banned the abaya in schools. The French say it's about secularism. Religion has no place in public institutions like schools. So by extension, neither do religious symbols. Now, there is some logic there. But here's what the other side says. If you ban the hijab or niqab, parents will take their children out of school. So in the end, it's the girls who suffer, one way or the other. It's always the girls who suffer. There is logic here too. I'm afraid there's no simple answer to this issue. Every country has its own method. But what we can do is lay some ground rules. For instance, accept that the hijab is a patriarchal vestige. You may think it's a cultural symbol. You may even think it's a choice. But don't deny the roots. Secondly, it's always about extremism. It's not always about extremism. Islamic State terrorists used to roam around in Western shirts and sneakers, yet women's veil is the problem. So let's be clear about intentions too. You cannot use the veil as a political tool, ban it when you want to be progressive, and impose it when you want to be conservative. That's not how it works. We need consistent policy on hijabs and niqabs, but for that, you need a debate based on merit and facts, not identity politics and false victimhood. And now let's turn our gaze to the southern part of Africa, to the nation of Zimbabwe. 3 weeks ago, the country saw an election. The incumbent, Emmerson Mnangagwa, won his second presidential term. It should be his second and last term in office. After all, Zimbabwe claims to have moved on from the past. It says the days of autocracy are over. But is that really the case? Mnangagwa's new cabinet says otherwise. He's appointed his son and nephew to key government posts. His critics have raised the alarm. The opposition have accused him of nepotism, of planning to bring family rule to Zimbabwe, of bringing authoritarianism back to the country. Now, a little background here. Africa is no stranger to nepotism. You saw in the recent Gabon coup how the Bongo family was entrenched in the country. In Equatorial Guinea, the president's son is vice president. There are many examples of dynastic politics across the continent. And then there's Zimbabwe, a country with a history of authoritarianism. Before the current president's first term, Zimbabwe was ruled by one man for 37 years. His name was Robert Mugabe. He's the current president's old mentor. Mnangagwa served as in Mugabe's regime in various positions, including as vice president. He became president after Zimbabwe's military replaced Mugabe in a coup. That was in 2017. At that time, there were promises of change and progress, despite the fact that same political party was in power, and Mugabe's right-hand man was given the charge. He won elections in 2018 and then again in 2023. Both were controversial. This year, observers from a South African regional bloc said the polls in Zimbabwe were not free or fair.
The mission noted that some aspects of the harmonized elections fell short of the requirements of the Constitution of Zimbabwe, the Electoral Act, and the SADC principles and guidelines governing democratic elections.
Observers from the European Union said the same thing. But Mnangagwa returned to power nonetheless. You put all this together, and you can see why Zimbabwe's opposition is worried. Last week, the winner, this man, took the presidential oath again. And he's been courting controversy ever since. These pictures are from last Friday. That's the president overseeing a graduation ceremony and handing out an honorary doctorate to his wife. That's right, his wife. That's the First Lady. She's now an honorary doctor of philosophy in law. And it's not her first honorary doctorate. Last December, she received a doctorate in development studies, again an honorary doctorate, and both these certificates were conferred by her husband, the president. They allegedly for her philanthropic work. Whatever the reason, this is not a great look, a president heaping awards on his wife. But it may still be better than what Zimbabwe's president did on Monday. He brought one of his sons to his cabinet. 34-year-old David Mnangagwa is now Zimbabwe's deputy finance minister. He was sworn in yesterday. What experience does he have in governance? Well, none. He graduated with a law degree last week. Before that, he was an actuary. Do the qualifications make up for the lack of experience and obvious nepotism? Well, that's for the people of Zimbabwe to decide. Maybe look into who awarded those degrees to the president's son. And other than the president's son, the president's nephew also found a place in the cabinet. He's been made Zimbabwe's deputy tourism minister. This nephew is 45 years old. He's been involved in party politics for a while. So he's another loyalist in the president's cabinet, another member of the family. When you look at the rest of the cabinet, it's mostly the same from his first term. It includes ministers with a poor track record, like the sports minister, Kirsty Coventry, a former swimmer under whose tenure football left Zimbabwe high and dry. Last year, FIFA banned Zimbabwe for 18 months due to government interference in the country's football association. That doesn't really speak well about her term. But when questioned about the return, Zimbabwe's president had this to say.
I am satisfied. I don't know who's not satisfied. When you become president, you can remove.
He's also brought back a man called Kembo Mohadi as vice president, the man who had to resign because of a sex scandal in 2021. These appointments look murkier by the day. An opposition leader put out this message after Zimbabwe's cabinet was announced. She called it a toxic mix of illegitimacy, corruption, violence, nepotism, incompetence, and sex scandals. Harsh words, but are they accurate? Will the president do anything to change this perception? Or will his focus be on propping up loyalists and paving the path for his children to take over Zimbabwe? And now let's take some break from our planet and talk about maybe our future planet. Scientists at NASA have made a new discovery. They think water could be present on the surface of another planet. This one is beyond our solar system. It's more than 100 light years away from the Earth, meaning it'll take 100 years for light to reach this planet from the Earth, and about 9 times the size of the Earth. Scientists say this is a massive planet. It could have an ocean. As you can imagine, this is rare. This planet is unlike anything else in our solar system. I don't know how to read celestial bodies, but I can predict your next question. Can this planet support life? Here's what we know so far.
K2-18b. No, this isn't the name of Elon Musk's next child. It's the name of a planet. A massive one. It's 8.6 times the size of the Earth. And it's not just any other planet, it's an exoplanet, meaning it's beyond our solar system. It's more than 100 light years from Earth, and it's unlike any in our solar system. Here's why. NASA used its James Webb Space Telescope to gaze at this planet. They've made an exciting discovery that hints at a possible water ocean on the planet. Scientists found methane and carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. This combination means the surface could be covered with an ocean. This isn't the first time this discovery's been made. In 2019, scientists used the Hubble Space Telescope. They spotted water vapor in the same planet's atmosphere. So, if there is water on the planet, does that mean it can sustain life? Not really. There's no proof that the planet can support life. Its size is too large. That could create difficulties. The planet's interior could have a large mantle of high-pressure ice, kind of like Neptune, or the ocean might be too hot to be habitable. The 2019 study mentions another problem.
The planet is located in a system more than 100 light years away, meaning that whatever image we try to get is the image of the planet 100 years ago. The light takes only 7 to 8 minutes to come from the sun to the Earth, but 100 years to go to that planet. So for us to travel there is impossible.
Even so, this shouldn't dash hopes of futuristic planetary colonization for all the billionaires out there. This is probably not the last time signs of water have been found on a planet, but it certainly isn't the first. In 2014, scientists found evidence of water vapor on another exoplanet. It was roughly the size of Neptune and about 120 light years away from Earth. But the lack of a guarantee on prospects of life on another planet need not be seen as a disappointment. You see, these revelations are less about colonizing another planet, or finding a planet similar to Earth, or even finding fun aliens. They're simply a gateway to more insight on other planets in space.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. If you're curious about what aliens look like, do not worry. Mexico has them out on display for you. 2 mysterious non-human alien corpses were displayed at Mexico's first public congressional hearing on UFOs. In China, a real-life episode of The Crocodile Hunter is playing out. Dozens of crocodiles escaped from a breeding farm during the floods. And in Hawaii, the restive Kilauea volcano is roaring back to life. It erupted for the 3rd time this year, spewing lava. And finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1993, Israel and Palestine signed the first Oslo Accord. It was the first of a pair of agreements signed on the White House lawns. This was the first time Israel and Palestine recognized each other. The accords were the closest the two sides have come to resolving the conflict. Eventually, it ended up in failure. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
reconcile the differences within the India front. So therefore the lead has been given to him. Now what has been decided, as we have been reporting earlier also, that at least on 440 seats there would be only one joint India front candidate to be put up against the BJP or NDA, so as to ensure that there is no division of the anti-BJP votes. But this again is easier said than done. Over the last few days we have been seeing lots of conflicts. For example, Bhagwat Mann, the Punjab Chief Minister, made it very clear that at least in Punjab, he's not going to give even a single ticket to the Congress.